So this is the last time we'll do it. If it does, from now on, it's on its own, unless somebody wants to play with it. You just have to hit live whenever. Anyway, yeah, no. Okay, and now comes another important part that we'll learn about. There I will meet you. Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, and I will impart to you from above the cover, from between the two krubim that are on top of the Ark of the Covenant, all that I will command you concerning the Israelite people. Okay, so what is going on with this cover? So he said on the face of it, it's because you need a door, you need something to close the ark. But it turns out that there's a dispute, a machlokas.
Six-sided box.
Right, to close it. Right.
So wasn't it already?
No, that's what we said. These
that.
are
all three of them.
Right, all three of them are open on the top. Right, okay. They don't have anything on top, so you need this cover to close it. But there's a dispute between Rashi and Ramban, which has halachic implications even, about whether these are two separate vessels in the temple or whether they're the same vessel. Meaning, you see that there's special things on this cover. It's not like a regular cover. It's not just serving a door for the top of the ark. Hashem says to Moshe, and in the end, where am I going to talk to you from? It's not from inside the box, like that. He's going to be talking to him from between the krubim, from the two figures on top of it. So it has its own function. You might say that these are two levels about it, but then Hashem wrote on it. Okay? So that's one level of revelation. Hashem is revealing the 10 Commandments, and they're Hashem's entire doing. And then later, this is the original Torah Sheba'al Peh, you could say. The original oral Torah, that Hashem is now talking to Moshe Rabbeinu, and relative to what's inside the ark, what he's now revealing to him, this is like an oral teaching. Later on, everything that happened surrounding the Aron becomes our Torah Shebachtav, our written Torah, and then we have the duty to continue the writing of the Torah using the oral Torah, learning what was already included within the ark. Right? Because at the end of his life, what else does Moshe put into the ark? He puts one more thing. The one of the 13 Torah scrolls that he completed on his last day. Right, on Zayin Adar, which is in a few days, Moshe's Yortzeit. And that day he completed 13 Sifrei Torah. He was writing them all along. And one of them he placed into the ark. And that becomes the written Torah. And from now on, the oral Torah becomes interpreting what's in the written Torah. But until then, what was inside the 10 Commandments, that was the written Torah, I'll call it. And what's on the outside, which is coming from the cover, is the oral Torah. So in a sense, the cover is very different from what's inside, from the Aron itself. So let's see Rashi. Rashi doesn't repeat it twice. It has already been commanded, verse 16, thou shalt put the testimony in the ark. So one may say that it intends to tell us that while the ark is still by itself without the cover, meaning there's just the ark, just the 5 sides with the open top, he should first put the testimony into it, and only afterwards should he put the cover on it for the first time. Thus, indeed, do we find that when Moshe erected the tabernacle, it is stated, and he took and put the testimony into the ark, and afterwards it says, and he put the cover upon the ark above it. So what is Rashi trying to tell us? Trying to tell us that the ark is not complete until it has all the components to it, including the cover. So it's just one vessel. I don't know. But he says, why does it have to say it twice? To stress the fact that this is all one thing. The tablets inside and the tablets as put before putting the cover. It's the same action. Don't look upon it as two separate things, meaning that you put the tablets in and that makes the aron, and then you put the cover in, and the cover closes the tablets. It's all one thing. It's all one vessel, just one vessel by itself.
So the
But
tablets are part of the vessel.
so the tablets and the ark and the cover, they're all one vessel.
So you have a Hachmas Sefer Torah, you put the Sefer Torah into the ark, that's after the ark is completed.
Right, you can close it. That would be another option. But you could put it, meaning don't complete. What Rashi is trying to say is, if you would have put the cover on without the tablets inside, you've completed the vessel, and that's it. And that's how the vessel will be from now on. So you have to put the tablets in first. So that when the cover is put on for the first time, by the way, it was never opened. It's not supposed to be opened. So once you put the cover on for the first time, it becomes one vessel. The Ramban, though, says that no, the simple reading why it's repeated twice is because really there are two separate vessels here. So and the tablets belong to both. That the tablets, on the one hand, they go into the ark itself, so they belong to the ark, the 5 sides without the opening, without the cover. And then there's another vessel called the cover, and it's a separate vessel altogether. Okay? So this is a dispute. The two vessels are one. Meaning, in other words, as we'll see it soon, in ourselves, there are two different ways of understanding what the ark symbolizes. Is it two separate things in us or one thing in us? Okay? Okay. So to understand it, the Rebbe in a Sikha, he starts with this, and then he explains, he brings the Hasidic interpretation of what the ark is doing, and particularly what the cover is. And he says like this, that the cover, which has these two kulbim on it, is the dot in the psyche. This is a big word. We translate them in 100 different ways. Knowledge, consciousness. Today we'll learn some new words for it. And we'll see how central it is to everything that we're doing as human beings. But that the cover is, and it's particularly the two kulbim on it, is the knowledge in the psyche. What about the ark and the tablets inside? They're chokhmah and bina. Okay?
The ark and what?
The ark itself, the 5, right? The 5 sides, the 5. How do you say it? Slot. I forgot. Peot. How do you say that in English? There's another word for it. It's a nicer word. Anyway, you understand. And the Torah that goes inside, that's the Chokhmah and Bina, that's the intellect in the psyche. And it makes sense, because really what's going on here? That the word of Hashem, like the tablets inside, that's the Chokhmah. And it goes into a building. Why is Bina called Bina? So the explanation that Chazal give, even though you can argue with this grammatically, but the Malbim explains why it's right, is that Bina comes from the word binyan, to build. It's to create an area, kind of, not an area, mu'kav, a structure that you can place things inside. That's how the Bina and Chokhmah work in the mind. But now the question is whether dat is something separate or not. That's really the question here. Is consciousness, or as we'll call it in a moment, attachment, is it something separate from Chokhmah and Bina, or isn't it? So like we'll see here, is that it depends. Rashi says it's not separate. Rashi is saying it's one thing. And Ramban is saying that it isn't one thing. And if you can say that it's almost like the difference between the nigla of the Torah and the sod of the Torah.
It's really the union of both, of Chokhmah and Binah, no?
So that's what we say most of the time. The da'at is unifying, but what does it mean that it's unifying? Is it something separate? Separate would mean that there are times that it doesn't unify, or isn't it? Or is it something that's entirely one and it never separates from them? It's like once you connect it, once you attach it, it can never draw apart. There's never any such thing. So what I think what you meant is that in the Tanya, right away when you start learning, you learn this phrase called Tren rein de lo mitparshin la'almin. You learn that Chokhmah and Binah, there are two companions that never part. So what causes them not to part? Is it that or is something else? I mean, usually we think that it's the dot inside them that causes them to always be attached. But as we'll see, it actually means looking at it and saying that there's Rashi and Ramban here, the two different opinions about whether it's one vessel with them or whether it's a separate vessel, is really that there are two types of dot and they're different. And this is an opening to understand a lot of things about how the psyche works. Okay, so this is what we're going to start. Where does it say that there are two types of dots? So it's a famous pasuk that Hannah said in her prayer, Ki kel de'ot avaya velo nitkanu alilot. That Hashem, Ki kel de'ot avaya, Hashem is a God of consciousnesses, of da'at, de'ot, two da'at. What are these two dots? So the way it's usually explained in Chassidus when you learn is that I'll use a big philosophical word called ontology, which really means that it's about the worlds. Meaning, from Hashem's point of view, He's the real existence, and this world is the Ein. It's call it the temporal existence. It's here only for a period of time. But it's not real existence. It's trying to say that it's normal. Hashem built it this way. You can't come to somebody and say the fact that you don't feel that there's Hashem in the world, you've got a problem. It's normal, because Hashem is a God of two consciousnesses. There's His consciousness and there's the consciousness He imbued us with. And everybody has this second consciousness. It's not like there's some tzaddikim, very few, a handful in every generation, that they sort of share Hashem's perspective.
How does the second one manifest in God? Like we have.
Oh, so hold on. So, since you asked, we have to say something right away. So it's like free will. Okay? That if this was not something real for him, then our freedom to choose would not be real either. It would just be an image, like something in the sun. But Hashem really wants us to have authentic, true free will.
Do you experience the second dot, or it's just for us?
Settle, hold on. Now you're getting ahead of yourself. So just to throw a little bit of it ahead of time, it's that the fact that there are these two modes of consciousness means that we really do have free will. That's the first thing to understand in it.
We even have two modes?
So now you add the right question, which is if Hashem has two modes, maybe we also have two modes. It's true, we do have two modes. So to understand our two modes, we're going to have to do a little bit more excavation here into what it is for us. But first, before we even start, so we have to understand dot better, this thing. And everybody knows, or hopefully everybody who's heard a little bit knows, that dot is a little problematic. Is it really a sphira? Is it not a sphira? Okay, on the one hand, 10 sphirot means keter, chokhmah, binah, all the way down to malchut, and you don't count dot. On the other hand, when you picture the sphirot, so that is there. It's where is it put? So it's put in between chokhmah and binah, just below them, and then just a little bit above chesed and gvura. What's the idea? That there are maybe the most types of a sphira are in dot, meaning that it serves so many functions. You'll see in a moment why. that on the one hand it's connecting our intellect together, and we'll see what that means later, but it's also connecting our emotions to our intellect. Okay. So I want to focus first of all, what does it mean that it's connecting our emotions to our intellect? The biggest problem that we have with emotions is that they're fleeting. It's very hard to decide to feel a certain way and to continue feeling that way over time. What's the biggest challenge that most people have is with a relationship with their spouse in marriage. I felt something, that's why I got married. And even if I got married because I decided to, but I felt something. It wasn't just because of guys. Maybe I met other people and I didn't feel that same thing. The fact that I felt something, the question then becomes, why does it disappear? Because emotions are fleeting because they don't naturally have dat. Dat is, and we'll use an important word instead of dat, a different translation of what it means, attachment. Okay? The dat is what causes attachment in the emotion. I'll explain it more as we go along. What do I mean? So it's a glue. Basically, you've got these magnets that you're sticking up, and the magnet over time fails. So you've got to figure something else out. And what really attaches it, the reason why it was easy in the beginning is because the dot that you received was this one-time dot. We'll talk about it as we go on. It's this original type of dot, which is almost like an epiphany, that you suddenly feel it, and it lasts for a while. But it can't last forever, because that's how it's built. That you have to incorporate into your emotions a second type of dot. A second dot. Now the way that Chazal say this is very interesting. What do you put on a marriage invitation? So you say the chassan's name and the kala's name. What do you put in between? So it says Ein Bet Gimel, right? What's Ein Bet Gimel? Im Bat Gilo. What does it mean? Im Bat Gilo means with the woman who's of his same age. That's literally what it means. What it's trying to say is that they're from the same mazel. That's really what it's trying to say. Bat Gilo, Ben Gil in Chazal means that we're from the same, call it, birth sign. So that we're under the same mazel. We belong to one another. This fits. But modern Jews don't like that. Why? Because what are you saying? That it's b'shert. It's like, and so we don't like that. So what do you want? What does it say? So they invented something else. It says im bchirat libo, ein bet lamed. Instead of ein bet gimel, you put ein bet lamed. What does im bchirat libo means? That is heart with the choice of his heart. And the same thing about her. Im ben gila. You don't have to change in Hebrew, Baruch Hashem, it's the same letters. So. Huh?
It's also more romantic.
More dangerous.
Right. So what is it? The truth is that they're both true, but people confuse them. They're both true, but they're not used the right way. In Bat Gilo means that there are. There could be an attachment, and it has to be the attachment over time is one that you have to awaken all the while. You have to choose again and again. You can't do it just once. So really, bchirat libo really means. So people use it to say it's the stronger one, but they're using it to say that I really were attached in the heart, and the bat gil is like something. But the truth is that the bat gilo is the one time. That's love at first sight, and bchirat libo, that's that I continually choose to connect again.
So we should do both.
No, you need both. So in a moment,
one is like a default there, and one is a dot. You have to constantly.
One is like natural. It's a natural outgrowth of who I am.
But I'm saying this exists in all situations in life.
We'll see. Everything that has to do with emotions is like that. So let's we have to give examples of all of these things, but the first one we'll say like this, that even before we get into the examples, is another thing that we want to add to this. Whenever we say that, so right away the sphera that it's supposed to come instead of, if I want to have just 10, is keter. So what's the main difference between keter and dat? Let's say that they do the same thing. They also create, keter also creates attachment. But the attachment in keter is called a covenant. Whereas the attachment in dat is just called kesher or chibur. It's a connection, but it's not a covenant. What's the difference? So Chassidus, it's explained that the word covenant, brit, is when two people decide to be connected in such a way that regardless of what happens, they will always be attached to one another, regardless of what happens. Somebody could say, but that also, I choose to connect to you even though, let's say, you hurt me. So that's not covenant. Covenant is that I don't have to choose anymore. Yeah. I've taken choice out of my hands. Meaning, even while you're hurting me, I still am connected to you. I can't sever that connection. I don't need to awaken. I don't have to choose again to connect to you. I've decided beforehand that regardless of what happens, we'll always be attached. It's constant, completely outside the realm of my choice. So it's not that, because there's no choice here. But it's a connection, it's an attachment. But we don't call it an attachment, we call it a covenant. What's the difference between them? So the main difference, except for there being two different types of attachment, one is that it's without choice and one that it is with choice. Right? In the keter there's no choice, in dat there is choice. The other main difference is one is not conscious. The keter is always super consciousness, it's above my consciousness. So I don't really go there ever. There's no reason to revisit it, because you can't. You can't. It's like something that I once actually had a real job. And so in my real job, they told me that if you have to take a contract out of the file where it was filed, you can rip it up already. Right? If you have to revisit a contract, what does that mean? That there's a dispute, and forget about it. No contract is detailed enough that it can settle everything that happens down the line. In that sense, that's why the covenant has to be outside of your consciousness. It's not up for discussion. A covenant is, that's it. But it's also, there's no choice. Okay?
But then there's two types after that subconscious.
Right. After that superconscious covenant, there's still two types.
But these two don't seem to even be the same element at all, because one of them endures and one of them doesn't.
Why? Who said? They can all endure.
No, but the bat kilo doesn't really endure, it doesn't really help you.
Why not?
Unless you have the other one.
It's there, it's always there. There's a natural affinity.
Yeah, but you said it's one that's fleeting. The bat kilo.
It's fleeting because it
right,
can't affect my emotions, but it's still there. Meaning that I can remind the person there was a reason why you got married. You remember, there was such a thing, but that doesn't help me now. That's what he says. But it's still there. But now, in the world of my emotions now, it doesn't help me. And my emotions now can't.
So it seems like it's a one-time function.
It's more than one time, because really, to say that's your mazel is saying that in effect your whole life is revolving around that in a certain way. Except that in your life you have different transitions. You go to different places, you feel different things, and you get to know other people, and suddenly you don't feel the way that you felt. The psyche is very complex in that sense, but it has a natural state to it. And it has something that it started with. If you want, you would call these things the innate nature, as opposed to how life changes our right. Yeah, you call it your nature instead of your nurture.
The kilo thing is like, if you grew up the same as your spouse, then you sort of think the same.
Right. That's like bat kilo also. Usually, that's why in shidduchim they try to find, as somebody who's one of my clients now, so he's very, very Haredi. So he told me that really, how do you do a shidduch? You try to find the two people that have the least not in common. You don't look for the most in common. It's not that they should have a lot of stuff in common. You look for all the things that could somehow cause problems because they're not the same, and you try to cancel them out. And then, if all the things that are negative are not there, so there's a good chance that they can connect. That's the way of thinking of it. That's bat gilo. That's like in that sense. So no. And again, that's why people didn't like this. So they went to bchirat libo, because you want the terms of the heart, not the terms of the mind. Beseder.
So God is conscious.
Beseder. So that's one. But now we're explaining it as attachment. Okay. To say it another way is that the dot that goes down into the emotions, it's what causes things to become persistent, to become consistent. You have to add dot all the time. You have to focus on something. So, I can't help but bring an example from last night. So I came home, and right away I was thrown into this terrible, terrible argument between my children. And my second son, so he completely lost it. And, slamming doors, the whole thing. If there's one thing I can't stand, it's noise. I can't stand noise. Strange. So I tried to calm him down, because I can't stand noise, so it's hard for me to shout, because I can't hear myself shouting. But eventually, nothing worked. Like, you calmed him down once, and then it just boiled over again. And it calmed him down a second, and boiled over. So finally, I took him to the side, and I yelled at him. I told him, listen, this is going to end. And the whole thing. And I was very, very upset at him. And at that moment, you could almost feel, or I could almost feel that there's a different type of attachment that I have with him than I have with the other brother that he was fighting with, who was very quiet on the side. And it bothered me. Like, why? So when I thought about it later, so I realized that that's my natural tendency. That if there's somebody who's quiet and somebody who's very loud, so my affinity is always to the one that's quiet. That's how I'm wired. I can't help it. But does that mean that I love one more than the other? No. It's not easy. At that moment, yes. Because I have more affection, more connection with somebody who's quiet. At that moment, I definitely prefer the older brother who was quiet. I can't run away from my feelings. I have to be kene. I have to be frank with myself. That at that moment, this was my favorite. And the other one, he's driving me crazy. So it's not. But still, does that mean that somehow the younger one came, because this had never happened, so he was so besides himself. So he said, "Do you want me out of the house? You want me to leave?" So I said, "No, that's not what we meant." I was still yelling, but that's not. He's 12. I told him, "No, where did you get that idea?" He says, "Because I can see that you're really angry with him. You're not angry with my brother." But because he feels,
you were telling him, get out of my house.
he feels that they were both at fault at worst. Before I started yelling at him, he was sure that he was right and his brother was wrong. After I started yelling, so then it became, so maybe we're equally at fault here. But when it continued, so then he came to the conclusion that since we're equally at fault and you're not saying anything to the other brother, because again, my affinity is to somebody who's quiet, who's not driving me out of my mind with a noise. So
I'm unwanted.
So he's unwanted and the other one is wanted.
No, he just felt what you felt.
He what?
He just felt.
That's what she said. That he felt that my natural affinity is someone else. But what's the mistake here? That that is a picture of psyche without dot. Okay? The fact that I can feel more connection to one than to the other, that's my psyche, call it, in its animalistic state, which is just a picture. It's not alive. There's no life in it. Dot is like life. What animates the picture of my psyche? My dot, my consciousness, my attachment. What changes the whole way that I see things? I have to bring back into focus that these are both my children. The moment that I feel, again, wait a minute, these both came out of me, so I can't say that I prefer one or the other. Because that, in that sense, is that, yes,
Step one step further. Show him you don't like noise. Nothing's wrong with that.
No, he knows that, but it doesn't help because when he's the that's the explanation. Wait.
Is he more like that?
Which one?
The one you answered. Is he more like you?
No, I'm not sure, but but the point was not so much who's more like me as much as what do I prefer.
Yeah, exactly.
Could be. Again, I don't see that. What the reason for why I prefer this or that is not the topic. The topic is, and this is what's important here, is that introduces life into the picture. Okay, what do I mean by introduces life? That when I'm stuck, it means that I have no dot in the system. Meaning I've gone to like some kind of ground state in my psyche. This is what I like, this is what I don't like, and there's no choice. I can't change. I have no way to overcome my affinities, my natural affinities. There's nothing in me that is higher than that. It's just how I am. Well, let's say it even more. There are parents that get stuck in their older age with a certain way of seeing their children. So, nobody here is, I think, is old enough yet, or maybe they are. No, I mean, to feel it. Okay. If you want to be the example. But you get stuck in a certain way. I experienced it with my parents, with how they saw me, right? That they can't get out of that picture of who I am, and that's it. Why? Because there's no dot there. The explanation here there's no dot. It's like it became a picture that's framed on the wall.
And that's a choice too.
No, it's the lack of choice. Meaning that you've given up on that,
I understand.
entering into what?
They're choosing not to put
Hold
it
on,
in.
settle. Maybe it could be that they're choosing not to. But the point is,
Happens to younger parents.
settle. Okay, so I think I once told this story that we were having issues.
Yes.
Actually, with our
my family.
right. Remember that?
My parents are like that.
Okay. So we went to Chaim Nativ, my wife and I. And again, you can have people who think about this all day and they can't see clearly right in front of their noses. So he listened to us. We said all these issues. This son is like my father, and this son is like her father, and they were like this and this and this and this and this. And then he looks at us, and I guess he was bewildered, because why would longtime students of Chassidus say anything like this? But then he said, they're their own souls. They're not a continuation of anybody. And we were like, what are we doing? We're like, we're turning them into caricatures. We're turning them into these flat pictures in ourselves. Not that they are, but the way we're looking at it, we've taken dot out of the whole picture. Let me say it.
You're talking about the second type of dot.
Right, hold on. We say always that the power of procreation is the infinite power in the psyche. Why? Because two people come together and suddenly they create life. So it says in Chassidus that this is the power of the infinite that only Hashem has, that He gave to human beings. Why is it not the same thing for animals? I don't want to discuss right now, but it's not infinite, it's finite power. Because animals are always just a copy of their parents. There it is true. But in human beings, it's not that way. But there we only talk about procreation, the act of conceiving as being an example of the infinite. The truth is that you retain this power of the infinite later also. Meaning every time that you choose to use your dat was the initial connection. Adam yada et Chava ishto, right? The procreation is called dat. But you can procreate all the time with whatever you know by adding dat into the story. It's the power of the infinite. And can give a whole new perspective. It streams new blood into the whole picture. And instead of being just a flat picture that's like, it's just framed on the wall, it becomes a living creature.
Because procreation is also with your words.
With your words, everything. But it starts from the fact that you have dat. That's why in the psyche, dat is like free will. What does life mean? Life for us really means that I still have the power to choose. I can choose this way or that way. So I can choose. So when I look at my children, to have dat, what do I have dat of? What's the main thing to have dat of? What really brings life in? Like the first time, it's that you were created. In this case, from me. Okay? That moment of creation, that's where dat is hinging on all the time. It's like adding that initial procreation into every moment. Like I said before, when I remember that they're both my sons, so it's true that I have a natural affinity, and there's no other way it can be, because you're a human being. But the moment that you add that you both came from me, my attachment with each one is infinite. Let me say it another way. Each one of you is an infinite world. In the end, I can't compare two worlds one to another. There's no comparison. You can't compare the infinite to one type of infinite to another. Can't or had is mathematical ideas. But when it comes to people, it doesn't work that way. If each person is a full world, and I treat him as a complete world, I see the infinite in him, so I can't compare. There's no comparison. You're one thing, and you're another thing. So the moment my dat enters, the natural affinities are again, they're like pictures on the wall. They're nothing, they're not alive, they're not three-dimensional, they're not alive compared to when I add my understanding that you were created from me. So when, just to say one more sentence, when Hashem looks at different Jews, it's the same thing. It can't compare between Jews. Why? Because each one's a different world. Banim atem laHashem Elokechem means that any Jew that he looks at, because he sees all the time that we're all his creations, so each one is infinite for him. And you can't compare. You can't say this one is better, this one is worse. They're both infinite. Each one is a completely different world. And that's what you really feel towards your children. So this morning when we were talking about it in the car on the way to school, so I told them, this really awakened in me the understanding that until you become a parent, you don't really understand how infinite your psyche really is. You don't see how you can relate to each one completely differently. And it's not a question of what do I prefer and what do I not prefer. In truth, you can do this with all your relationships. Except there it's harder because you didn't create the people that you're involved with. But what you can add to which will add consciousness, add dat into your perspective, is that this is a creation of Hashem. If you see the source of everything in Hashem, then right away you see this is infinite. So I can like and not like in terms of my natural affinity, but when it comes down to it, what I'm looking at is an example of Hashem's infinity in the world.
Is the potential to activate and use that level of dart equal whether you have a natural dart behind either of them? Like someone...
No connection.
there's no connection at all.
They're different.
So no, I know they're different, but I'm saying, is there any mashma'ut to having the first natural dat?
Oh, no. So I didn't understand what you asked. Okay.
Right.
What I'm saying is that because of the natural affinity that we have to things or not, we tend to not exercise our choice, and therefore things become flat.
Yes.
And then you sort of just fall into how you're used to seeing it. But that's just a caricature of what your natural dat is saying. It's mamish a caricature.
So to put that,
You-
you see the divine in the person.
Right, to add dat into the whole story is to add the infinity to bring it back to life.
I'm saying it's like irrelevant
Thank you.
if I had the natural dot before. Not, in other words, you can have the child you gave birth to and activate that higher level dot where there's infinity here, and I can have a child I adopt
I was thinking of adoption.
that I don't have the bat gilo part with this child, but I
Nachon.
can still activate the second dot, and we can both reach the same level.
Nachon.
Or
It's
is there a mashma'ut to the person who has the bat gilo?
definitely there's mashmut. You can't say
Okay, that's
that there's the same.
And does it-
There's meaning.
and
There's
does it
an
impact
added
how
meaning.
my second dot
There's an
is
added value to
fine,
it.
but does it impact how I use my second dot? Or
Yes,
no?
it'll also
It
impact
does.
how you use it,
Oh.
because you have some because you have this natural connection in terms of the
You better
data.
activate the second
Okay,
dot or
okay.
use it more
It's,
deeply.
it's more easy.
This is really Beata El Chacham.
Sorry?
This is Beata El Chacham.
Say no to adoption.
בסדר, right, בסדר.
Say no to adoption.
That's why it's so hard.
נכון, נכון,
That's right.
נכון, 100%. Okay, so
Yeah, there,
My kids will say that I favor my youngest. He's not like me. It's not something I'm serious.
you have a natural affinity.
For what?
You have a natural affinity for something there. It doesn't matter what it is exactly. You can look for it.
He's hard.
And that's
So maybe because he's your youngest. It could be that it's just because
I don't favor. I just don't get angry.
because you're older. By the way, here's an example that it has nothing to do with who they are in the sense of their character, but rather when did we meet? We met when I was at an age where I didn't have strength to get angry anymore. Okay, I don't have strength for that anymore.
He's the same age as me.
And you do get angry at him.
But I'm saying I won't hear the kids say he's your favorite. That's
So
not
if you feel that it has to do with whether you get angry or not, then that's what they
maybe
see.
it's like
And it could be something like that. It's not them.
Because it's the youngest. It's a protection, overprotective.
It's not their character, it's where you were at the time. Okay? And that becomes the caricature of the whole story. That becomes the affinity, and then it can turn into the caricature. But when you look at all of them at the same time, and you understand that these are all my continuation, the feeling towards all of them is infinite. There's no favorite anymore. Because it's almost you can't introduce that language into the feeling of a person being an infinity. It's like you can't really relate to him that way. Yeah, there was somebody who really developed this. I don't want to get into him now, but Levinas has a lot about this, about seeing the other as infinity. But he definitely doesn't connect it to that. He doesn't explain the mechanism. It's just two ways that he says that you can see people. Okay, so this is just the beginning, laying the groundwork. We're not going to finish today, the whole topic. It's going to be at least 2 weeks. Okay, because there's a lot of stuff here.
is an opinion. You can have two of the greatest tzaddikim in the world, and they will not make a meeting. And then, right?
So,
And then you, whatever, biggest brush, however you want to say it, you need 10 Jews.
okay.
What about 11 women?
No.
9 women, 11.
I'm like, so,
Okay, so first of all, just to finish the whole story with marriage, because there's one more piece that we have to add to it. The Rogachover, and the Rebbe loved this, and he mentioned it many times. He explains that there are certain mitzvot that you don't do just once. Meaning, and one of them that he writes is marriage. He says kiddushin and nisuin. Kiddushin actually is one time, but nisuin, he calls it mitzvah mitmashechet. And how does he prove it? Because he says that that Nisuin has to have dat, Kiddushim and Nisuin have to have dat in them. And because dat has Hesech dat, that you can stop paying attention or stop being attached to something, so you have to renew that attachment all the time. You have to choose again. What?
We had a friend that told him Mazel Tov.
Not just a friend. Chaim Brisk told him.
I just didn't know the name.
To the Rogachev?
Chaim Brisk told the Rogachover, so according to your Shita, you can say Mazel Tov every day.
Oh, now we
He
get
said,
it.
yes, exactly, that's what I meant.
He gave me back a snap or something.
No, I'm sorry, but the simple idea is, without the snap, is that he agreed, because he put it like to laugh at him, but he also understood, he chapped the meaning. What does it really mean? It means that the one act that you do when you get married, that's enough only for the natural dat, for the what's on the basis. Or even if you were awakening something at that time, that's no guarantee that the day after you'll still have it. And you have to reawaken it all the time. And that's what introduces life and affinity into the whole story. So let's add something more about this whole concept. According to the Ramban, who says that the covering is something separate, the covering of the ark is a separate vessel from the ark itself. So there's a pasuk in Mishlei that Chazal used to explain the whole story of the Mishkan. And the pasuk says, "Yes, zahav v'rav pninim." There is gold and many jewels. Pninim, even though we translate today as pearls, but in Mishlei, pninim always means jewels. Ukli akar siftei dat. And the precious vessel are the lips of dat. This is actually, you could say, the original source from where we understand in the Zohar and other places that the covering is about dat. Why? Because Chazal say in the Gemara that what happened was that the Jewish people brought the zahav. They brought all the gold for the tabernacle. And when the Nisim, the heads of the tribe, saw that everything had been brought again, so they said, what can we bring? So they brought the jewels for the Choshen. And Moshe looked at all this, and he said, what part do I have in this mitzvah? I don't have anything to give. Everything's already been given. So Hashem said to him, "Ukli akar siftei dat," that the most precious vessel are the lips of dat, the lips of knowledge. Chazal explained that what he told him, "V'no'adati lecha mi ben shnei akruvim," that understand that everything, all these vessels, everything, it's all beautiful, and without them there's not the next stage. But the whole point is for me to be able to speak to you. What is he saying here? That you can prepare, like in marriage also, you can prepare everything, but in the end, if there's no dat, then it doesn't matter how beautiful everything was prepared. It could be the most beautiful wedding, most beautiful home, you can have all the money in the world. It doesn't matter, because in the end, this is all just to prepare one thing. Like here in the Mishkan, that Hashem says, I want to talk to you. And so that here in this sense, I think we mentioned it before, is dibur. It's a communication between people. Okay, between Moshe. Here it's between Hashem and Moshe. He says this whole tabernacle that I built.
What's it that says?
This verse that we're in Mishlei in Proverbs. Where it's in Proverbs, I don't remember. So it says this was all, to say it another way, is that everything that I'm building in my psyche is very nice, but it's for one thing in the end. to have choice, to have that. To speak to Hashem, to be in dialogue. That if I'm not in dialogue with Hashem, so what did I build all this beautiful consciousness, all my knowledge of Torah? And everything that I'm learning, everything that I'm deepening in, all the things that I know, and that they build me, this is all very nice, but if it doesn't translate into a conversation in the end, that I am in dialogue with Hashem about my life, so that there's no doubt that was the whole purpose of the whole thing. Right?
With the healing of the
Right, like David HaMelech, he's the most... Okay.
What about people who don't have,
The word.
like, no, I mean, people who don't have any connection at all to God, but not by choice, I guess? Like, they have no way of ever getting to this kind of...
Nachon, it's a huge problem.
Yeah.
Philosophy tried to solve it by introducing a person like Plato's dialogues into trying to somehow reflect upon life. That's what they call it. And in the end, there is something to it. It's not that it's completely empty. It's definitely better than not doing anything. But in the end, the conversation you can only have with somebody. You can't have a conversation with yourself. It's not the same thing.
And something else outside of yourself?
It has to be right.
Right, I know I'm saying if not God, but something else outside of yourself.
Settle. You can. So people end up talking to walls, whatever they do. But it's a big.
No, I'm saying understanding that they need to connect.
So that's why people talk to each other, right? That's why. Right. Yes, definitely. The fact that there's another person already changes everything. Okay? But that's why even if you are from, so Rebbe Elimelech Lijan says you have to have one friend that you can tell everything to. That if you can't have a dialogue about your life with somebody, so in the end there's no doubt there. There's no infinity in life in it. And you just become a caricature. You start becoming flat. That's why people go to psychologists. Because they need that friend that should be a natural part of life. They need that friend to give them the opportunity to speak and to reflect upon what they're going through. But again, that's why Hashem has to be personal. He can't be somebody who's the whole picture of Hashem being somebody that just commands you and then have fun, doesn't care. That's not Hashem. That's some other religion that I don't know what it's called. Hashem is because this is the most important conversation that I'm having in my entire life. This is how do you do it? So Rabbi Nachman says you go out into the field and you talk. So, there's one way. You can do it every moment. Right? Like right now when I'm talking to you, so I'm having at least another conversation with Hashem at the same time, which is tell me what to say. Tell me what to say. But I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. And keep saying, and it keeps running through my head. What's the next? We'll see. Okay. Okay, let's see. So everything that we've talked about, really we've done mostly an example of what we will call souls. This is a topic that here with this group we haven't even begun to explore. But the Baal Shem Tov says that for everything that if you want to unify with Hashem, for everything that you do, you have to have 3 levels, 3 dimensions of awareness. And he calls them world, souls, and divinity. Right. This is his famous letter to his brother-in-law. And in his letter he describes it on Rosh Hashanah of Tafkuf Zayin. He went up to Shemaim and he went into the chamber of Mashiach. And he asked the Mashiach, when will you come? And he told him, when your wellspring is spread forth, and everybody is able to do what? To unify the way that you unify. Avodat HaYichudim, the service of unification. Basically, that godliness, divinity, is omnipresent. Everything is godly. That's unification.
Everything's
Godly, everything is divine. To see divinity in everything. And when he heard that, he said his heart sank, because he said that to teach everybody how to do this is going to take a really, really long time. So Mashiach will never come. So then the Mashiach told him some secret name with which everybody could learn how to do this quickly. It's like a shortcut. But, says the Baal Shem Tov, they didn't let me reveal this name ever. I was never given permission. But instead, they gave me something else. And I'll teach it to you now. That's what he's writing to his brother-in-law, Gershon of Kitov. And he says that in every word that you say, you should see worlds, souls, and divinity. Meaning that anything that you want to fully understand, you start from understanding it in worlds, you advance to souls, and then you eventually see divinity in it. So this is like a three-step ladder to get to seeing divinity in everything that you do and see and say. So everything that we said so far is mostly souls. Because psychology in general is mostly about the souls. But it doesn't mean that you can't learn from other aspects as well. And seeing it in worlds, the same idea in worlds, and seeing the same thing in divinity, gives a better understanding of what we're talking about these two types of dot. So, in Chassidus, you usually start from souls. That's the natural way to start, in the middle. And then you go back to worlds, or sometimes to divinity. It depends on how it is. So let's go back to worlds. So what are these two types of dot, two types of attachment in the world? So I was thinking of bringing you an example in mathematics, and then I said that's not nice. Right? So it's not nice. So I'll bring right, so you know mathematics. So maybe later. But the simplest example is Hashem in creating the world. That when did Hashem make a covenant about the world? Where's the Keter? When did that show up suddenly? Right, after the Mabul, after the flood. So he reveals that there is a covenant about the world's existence. He tells Noach. And it's a Brit, and it's in the Keshet, and seven times he says the word Brit. It's a sevenfold covenant. There's a lot to learn from that. Last year we learned about the intelligences. So in the origin there's 7, and then there's 2 more. So whoever remembers that. So that was about the 7 covenants with Noach. But what about Hashem's choice to create the world? So that clearly was in Bereshis, right? Hashem decided to create the world, and He created it. Or decided to create man, Aseh Adam, and then He created him. But that's not enough, says the Baal Shem Tov, because in Tehillim it says, L'olam Hashem dvarcha nitzav b'shamayim. That even though to us it sounds like Hashem created the world once, 5,777 years ago, if you're into science, so 15 billion years ago, it doesn't matter which perspective you have, it depends on how your mind works. So it seems like it was a one-time event. But it says about Hashem, but this verse it says, L'olam Hashem dvarcha nitzav b'shamayim, that forever your word is hanging in heaven. It means that Hashem is recreating the world at every moment. So what does that mean? So he says what it means is that even though He decided to create it once, it was like Bat Gilo, that He decided He and the world are a good match. He has to decide again and again every moment to keep it going. And in a sense, that's what gives it continuity. Okay? That without that decision in the worlds, meaning Hashem's word is hanging here, means that there's this dot that He's constantly has the world in mind to keep it going, because that's what the Alter Rebbe explains in the Tanya, that His actions are not like a person's actions. That if I form something, it's yesh miyesh, it's something out of something. So if I made this table, I can go away and go to a different country, and the table will stay the way it is. But Hashem's actions are yesh mi'ayin. There's something from nothing. So if He doesn't continue to bring it out of the nothingness, so it'll go back to being nothing. So He has to continually focus on it. And someone would say, so that means that Hashem has less, maybe Hashem is weaker than me. What I can make, the problem is though that He He has to create the matter itself. He has to create the thing that will continue. Okay? I already get it. Hashem is making this exist from moment to moment. Now He can fashion it. That's called the yesh miyesh. But Hashem, He has to create the material itself. So if He doesn't recreate it at every moment, it'll go back to being nothingness. So that's not about souls. We're not talking about a soul here. We're just talking about the fact that there is a world here, what I see here. It's different, right? It's not about emotions. It's not about, right, do you feel attachment or not? It's attachment in the sense that things persist, that matter persists. Why is it that this floor persists? Because Hashem is constantly bringing it into existence, out of the nothingness. So that's another example of what it means a dot. There's the initial dot that He's interested in, and He says, yes, this one I'll take pleasure from, this world I want it. But then that He has to redecide again at every moment that He wants to actually make it persist. And without that persistence, it's not going to exist. Not going to.
Is actually a sign of reminding himself.
Right. So,
choosing again.
It's not even to destroy it. It's just that if I don't,
Not create.
if I stop creating, it's not destruction. It'll just cancel. Okay, go back to what it was initially. Okay, so that's an example in worlds of these two types of dot. Now the question becomes: so is it connected or not connected? Is it the same thing? Is it the same thing or not the same thing? Is the cover the same vessel as the ark, or is it not? Is this dot that Hashem is introducing to recreate things? Is it the same thing? Is it the Chokhmah and Bina? Is it attached to it, or is it something separate? Is it a different vessel? So what would be the difference? So if I say that they're the same vessel, so that's determinism. If I say that the cover, the dot, is the same thing as the Chokhmah and Bina, meaning Hashem planned out how the world should be, right? It's a plan. He didn't just stop, let's see what happens. So He's a plan. He set things in motion. That's His Chokhmah and Bina. He's planning how to build the world. So if the dot, His intent every moment to keep it going, is the same thing as His Chokhmah and Bina, that means that the world is deterministic. It never changes. Right? His choice is always the same. He always chooses exactly the same way. Okay? Right? They're one thing. They're always connected. That's according to Rashi, that it's one vessel.
Yeah, but it says like Hashem changed His mind.
Oh, it says no. Ki lo adam hu le'inachem. So it's the same machlokas. You can't get away from this machlokas because it's at the root of all Yiddishkeit. Because there's a nisiyat afachim here. There's like the deepest thing a person has to understand Yiddishkeit is that there's always a machlokas. That's why people start learning Gemara. Okay? You have to understand that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, they're both right. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. That's the first thing that you learn. Because the world is not one-faceted. Because Hashem is infinite, so how could it be one-faceted? Hashem is everything, so He's also the contradictions. So they have to come to play in some way, except that in Hashem all the contradictions are at the same time. In us, they're one after another. I can't get both sides of the paradox at the same time. I flip from one to the right. The famous, easiest way to say it is this sentence I'm saying now is false. Right? So you flip it. Every time you think about it, it flips. Okay? It's just how it works. Because you can't hold them both at the same time. That it's both false and true. You hold it from two sides. It's like you can't burn the paradox at both ends. You can only burn this side, then you burn that side, and you burn that. It gets shorter and shorter. So if I'm like Rashi, that he doesn't change his... What?
That's not a paradox.
Right, so we explained last week.
So what?
We're body and soul at the same time.
So, but I have no awareness of that connection. This umaflila asot, that I can't understand how Hashem connects them. Because if I could create life also.
If I denied it, then I wouldn't believe in Hashem, though.
So, but still you continue, because it's not whether you deny it or not. Hashem makes it happen. He holds the paradox at the same time. He holds your body and soul together at the same time. But I don't know, even all the people in the world come together, they can't create one mosquito. We don't know how to attach those two things together. Something that was already attached, we can keep attached, but we don't know how Hashem does it. Okay. So what's the other side? That the cover is not part of the dot is not part of the Chochmah and Bina. It means that there are miracles, that it's not deterministic, that there is free will, and that a person can decide to change reality. That's the side that says, I gave you choice, I gave you free will. If it was only that the cover is the same vessel, so there would be no role for my free will, the world would still be a world. It would still be something interesting. But I wouldn't play a part in it. The moment that he says, like the Ramban, that the vessel of the cover is separate from the vessel of the ark, so now he is giving me free will to do something. Okay, here we need to add something very important psychologically. We're going to do the souls in the worlds. Okay, so the souls in the worlds means that even in the worlds there's also world, souls, divinity. They also divide. This is what creates the partnership between me and Hashem. Hashem, he created the world. V'adam alei asam, as the pasuk says, and he put a man in it. From his point of view, the world continues to be deterministic. Hashem knows everything that will happen. It's called a kol tzafui. Everything is known. Everything is foreseen. That's his partnership with me. That I know that this floor will continue to be hard even as I sit on it. And that's his partnership with me. That he guarantees to keep wanting this world. And not just wanting this world, but wanting this world the way he planned it, deterministically. So I can count on the fact that stone is stone, it doesn't suddenly become air, and I can sit here with relative security. Okay? My partnership with him, it seems, is that I have to play my role. What's my role? To choose. If I don't choose, if he gave me all this ability to choose and I don't choose, so. But now we'll see that it's not that way. It's exactly the opposite.
Wow.
It's exactly the opposite from it. The real partnership is exactly the opposite. What does it mean? And again, this is about the dot. It's about this knowledge. So the most important thing about dot in halacha is that, we mentioned this already in terms of marriage, is a dat kuna. Dat kuna. To acquire something, you have to have attachment. You have to have consciousness. That's why a young child can't buy anything. Why? Because they don't understand. They don't have a real attachment to the object. So, en kinyan bekatan, or a servant, an evid. If he buys something, he really didn't buy anything at all. Who bought it? His master bought it. Because he has no dat. So, dat is called kinyan. The main thing that it gives you is the power to, if you want, the power to property. That's the way. But it's not just property, because anything that you're koneh, it could be many things. Chazal say this, dat kanita ma chasauta. That if you have dat, you have everything. If you don't have im dat lo kanita, how's the other side of it? I don't remember the other side. And if you don't have dat, it's like you never purchased anything in life. You never acquired anything at all. To say it another way is that if you make a decision to act a certain way, and there's no dat in it, there's no real dat, there's no real decision, kvi'ud dat it's called, like to decide that this is, and to awaken this decision all the time, then you haven't acquired anything. And then tomorrow you go back on your decisions, you go back on everything that you decide. You feel like I have to awaken, I have to find shortcuts to awaken all the time in myself these choices. It's not natural. Okay? That's the main thing that you have to come out of this class with. That it's not natural for a person to be able to make a decision, an emotional decision, and to stick by it. It's not natural. You can't count on nature to do it for you. You have to consciously every time decide. And even when you wake up in the morning and you feel this way anyway, decide anyway again. And you keep doing this again and again and again until it becomes part of your ritual. And that's called dat kanita machasata. If you've acquired dat, you have everything. So, let's say it again. But if I purchase a table, so only I need the dat. I need to attach myself to this table and to want it to become mine, and that's how I purchase it. The table doesn't need that. The table doesn't know who purchased it. It doesn't care. Because it has no dat. But if I want an attachment to another person, so the other person has to agree, meaning the other owner, the previous owner of this table, has to agree, also has to have dat, to give it to me. I can't purchase something from somebody if they don't have dat. So if I go to a little child and I say, "You want to sell me your house?" Yes. Sure. What are you going to give me for? 2 candies? No problem. Because there's no doubt there. There's no understanding. There's no attachment really. When Rabbi Yoel Khan, when he tries to explain that to people, so it's actually based on a mimer from the Rashav. So I don't know if he still does this. He takes out a $100 bill and he rips it. He says, "What did you feel?" That's attachment. That's that. What you felt there is your attachment going down the drain. But you do that to a child, even a child that understands what $100 is, and you do that, nothing happens inside. Because there's no dat yet. So you have to understand what it means to really, right, to sell something.
Best car or, a toy.
Okay, there he understands. Right, but he doesn't yet understand. That's why we say he doesn't have real kinyan yet, because he doesn't understand money. It's the money, It's again that we exchange things in a way that we're not looking at what's called the nominal value. We're not looking at the essential value, we're looking at the nominal value. And the nominal value is like, it says 100 on it. It says 100, who cares what number it says there? It's a piece of paper. What's the big deal? Even if I understand this piece of paper is a lot, but that is when you cringe. When you really understand what it means to have this or not to have this. So, when 2 people are involved, and what's the highest form of kinyan? The highest form of kinyan is between a man and a woman. That's kiddushin. So the highest form of kinyan is called dat kona, or the kone, the dat of the one purchasing, and there's dat makne, the one who's giving it up. And in marriage, you need both to have that, right? You can't get married if one of the, right, that's the whole issue with, I don't know what they do, but that's the main issue with, today it's couples with Down syndrome. I don't know what they do, whether it's really marriage, I have no idea. I'm talking out of my teeth here. Whether they have that or they don't have that, whether it's really can be considered any kind of marriage according to Allah or not. It used to be that way for deaf people, because there was no way to communicate with them.
That would not work today.
No, because today they have that, because we figured out
But they not have doubt before. They do.
without language there is no doubt. That's the idea.
They devise their own way of talking.
They can devise a lot of things until we got to the point. Until we came to the point where we could teach them language, that we've learned how to get over their handicap, there is no doubt. Because a person who can't speak, not that he can't speak because he can't make sounds, because he doesn't understand language, an animal, a brute, has no doubt. That's the definition.
Mute also.
Again, depending on whether or not. So if he can write out, he writes out everything. So I see he has language, there's no problem. So when a man and a woman get married, so there's dat kona and dat makna. There's 2 sides of it, but the same thing also exists between me and Hashem. that when Hashem creates the world, He's koneh olam bebinyan. That's what we call it. That Hashem is koneh olam. We even say it. When do we say koneh olam? On Erev Shabbos, when we're recreating the world, we're telling the story of the recreation, right? There's no chazaras hashatz in Ma'ariv of Erev Shabbos. We say koneh olam. We say that Hashem purchases the world. What do you mean purchase? He gives His da'at for there to be a world, but we also have to agree, because there's another person here. There's another consciousness here. He's not just creating animals and trees and birds and stones. He's creating another consciousness. So we also have to agree to be His. We also have to agree to the world. So now the question becomes, when you're talking about what His dad is giving me and what my dad is giving Him, it's actually the reverse from what we said before. That His kinyan of me is to give me free will. My kinyan of Him is to say that the world is entirely deterministic. So it's the reverse from what we said before. We said that only in Him you would say that if it's one and parcel with His chokhmah and bina, so it means that the world is always the same. There's no free will in it. And if the cover is something separate, it means that there is free will. That's from His perspective. But if we now add both of us into the equation, there's both me and Him. So what does He give me? He gives me His dot. The dot He's giving me is His lower dot, the dot that gives me free will. What dot am I supposed to give Him? My higher dot, which says that everything is in His hands. It's all deterministic. There's a famous story about this with the Baal Shem Tov. I've told it before, but it's too good to not to leave out of the mix here. That there was a Morano Jew that survived in Spain until the time of the Baal Shem Tov, and wasn't that long after. It was 200 years later. So he knew he was Jewish at some level, and he hid his Judaism from the Spaniards. He's a very successful economist, so they made him the minister of finances or something like that. But then the church, the Inquisition went on until sometime in the late 18th century. The Inquisition found out that he was hiding his Jewish identity, that he was still a Jew, right? Most of the Moranos are just entire congregations that, unfortunately, when faced with the option of whether to be burnt inside their shul or to accept Christianity, so this is after they asked, and they were told by many authorities at that time that they can hide their Judaism and profess to be Christians on the outside. So why they decide that? Why it's not avodah zarah? What that means is apparently they didn't consider Christianity to be avodah zarah at that time. The rabbinic authorities will allow them to do this. So,
They should all burn alive?
what?
If it's avodah zarah, they should all burn alive.
Okay, because then it's yaregu bal yavo. You're not allowed to. The issue really is that there's definitely averos involved, and then it becomes that in front of 10 people, anything is like that. Everything is yaregu bal yavo. So how did they get over that? I don't know. I'm not familiar with this issue enough. In any case, so what they did was, lechatchila, they professed to be Christians on the outside, and they all kept Yiddishkeit on the inside. And slowly, as the Inquisition got better, people had to really choose. There was no option. So he was only discovered in the time of the Baal Shem Tov. And they set a time to kill him to burn him at the stake. So everybody, gets to see a great show. So the whole city center is full, and he's tied to the stake, and they're about to light the wood around him, and suddenly there's a earthquake, and the stake breaks in two, and he is able to escape, and everybody runs away. So he's able to escape, and he left Spain, and he made it into the rest of Europe. And he traveled around, and he had one thing in his mind that he couldn't decide what was the truth. He wanted to know if this was a miracle specifically for him. He knew that something great had happened, but his question was the miracle such that at that moment Hashem changed everything and there was an earthquake? That's what saved him. Or was the miracle, like in Megillas Esther, that everything was sort of like moving towards that moment in time where there was supposed to be an earthquake anyway, and it just happened to be that he was placed on the stake at the right moment? Was that the miracle? Meaning, exactly what's going on? Is it a natural sequence of events, or is it God changing the entire structure of nature to be able to save him? And he went around all of Europe looking for somebody who would answer his question. So eventually he made it to Mezhibush, and it says that he walked was allowed into the Baal Shem Tov's study, and the Baal Shem Tov didn't listen to him. He already knew the question. So he said, "Let's go outside." So he took him outside, and they walked along and then he let him tell him the story. So we heard the story. Then he said, "Look over there." And then across the street, there's a wagon with hay, and there's a Ukrainian farmer who apparently is in tremendous pain. You can see in his mouth. He's got this toothache. And absentmindedly, he puts his hand into the wagon, he pulls out a straw, and he sticks it in his mouth, and suddenly you see him like this relief. So the Baal Shem Tov said, "What just happened?" He said he must have found it's called ruta, I don't know, whatever this is, that type of plant, and it has anesthetic qualities. So he says, what happened here? Was the ruta there, and he just happened to put his hand in and take it out? Meaning that it was there anyway, it's just that Hashem guided his hand to take out the ruta out of the whole wagon full of hay? Or was there no ruta there? When he put his hand in, Hashem turned one of the straws into ruta, and what do you think is right? So he said, of course I think that ruta was there, and it happened to be. So I said, is that a miracle or not? It's still a miracle, doesn't it? So I said, what does it matter? It's still a miracle that it turned out, and he couldn't see it for some reason, he couldn't see it yet, that it was still a miracle that everything had orchestrated in such a way that he was placed on the stake at the moment that because even it's timing, is a minute off. Even if Hashem decreed that this earthquake would occur 5,000 years ago, the fact that you were placed on the stake at exactly the right moment, that itself is the miracle. That's what he explained to him. That's what he explained to him. What?
Who triggered that timing?
Hashem. It's like to make everything. He orchestrates. No, it's like you don't have any.
Didn't trigger Hashem to orchestrate the timing.
No, Hashem wanted to save him, so he orchestrates that everything work at the right time. Meaning, the guy puts his hand in, he could put it in anywhere. Hashem makes it happen right there.
His role in it is for some reason this man had to survive.
Right, Hashem decided that. So it's a miracle.
But to his credit, not everybody survives.
I don't know. It's not his credit or not his credit. It's still a miracle though. Is it the man that Ukrainian farmer? Did he just do a great mitzvah and that's why his no? This is why it's less of a miracle.
Born from this man, he needed to do a tikkun for something in the past life, or something that needed to continue.
Okay.
We're saying what's the relevance of the miracle?
Okay. So now after the Baal Shem Tov told him this, so he went back. So he was satisfied with that answer. And then he went on and he became a Jew openly and everything. He lived his life. But the students of Baal Shem Tov, when they heard this, so they said, "What? It's much less of a miracle. How can you say it's the same thing? What if Hashem now changed, it's called, he changes nature for you. So that's 100 times more a miracle. So the Baal Shem Tov said, no. Oh, exactly. So the Baal Shem says, no. It depends on whose perspective you're looking from. That if you're looking at what's harder for Hashem, I don't know how to answer that question. Neither of them is hard, and they're equally difficult. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. That question doesn't make any sense. But if you're asking what should I see it as, okay? So I need to see it as. So now you say which one?
As if it was
So
created.
you were saying lower or higher? Like,
We are supposed to see ultimately it's all Hashem.
Settled, but which side?
the world is deterministic.
Is it the world deterministic and it's just Hashem orchestrated that I fall on the right moment?
I would say that other one just, but I don't know why.
So that's what we just explained. So he told them, it's not the same thing, they're two different, but it depends on where you're holding. If you only see the world's perspective, just the worlds of the world, the externality of reality, so the greatest thing you can say to somebody is that Hashem orchestrated it. But the world has always been this way, it's deterministic, meaning the cover is the same as the Aron. That he's just persisting in what he decided a long, long time ago, and that's what you enjoyed. That there was a decision when the world was created that in this moment, at that exactly this place. But then it turns out that even the orchestration is not really an orchestration because it also was decided at the moment that the world was created. But if you're holding in the sense of the souls in the world, you see the psychology of what's going on. So the greater understanding is to see that this is a new thing right now. That Hashem gave you free will to change it right now, and because of, like you said, something that you did, or that you have that power, so that now you can change it. And that creates it. But it depends on where you are. If all you understand is just worlds, so the highest form of miracle that you can see is that how is it that Hashem planned it out so well? It's beautiful. Look at this. But if you understand the soul in the world, the level of souls, the dimension of souls within the dimension of worlds, then you can already understand that this is a new event right now that happened because of my actions, because of my free will. What?
You must see it that way if you want to be.
But which one is true? They're both true. It just depends on which perspective you're in. Again, it depends on how you can go in yourself. If I say to somebody who's only looking at worlds, he believes there's a Shem, but he only has a perspective of worlds, so all he'll be able to connect with is that Hashem orchestrated this from the beginning. I have no role in this. There's so many. I have many of these conversations every year with all kinds of people who are rationalistic Jews. That you just can't. You can't go beyond that. That's as far. But do you believe that Hashem orchestrates everything? Yes, I believe 100%. Very nice. So at least you understand that it's
on a certain level, like it's not flat. You're saying it's like.
For them, the world is flat.
You said we are
What?
You said that.
Say again?
We're manifestations of Hashem that move the world forward.
But even that manifestation, does it have free will or not? For them, there's no free will. They're perfectly happy with a world in which Hashem never gave us free will. It's okay.
My free will, it's his free will.
That's already to understand. If there's free will here, it's because he gave up his.
True, when he made
How free will comes about is not the question.
Why do I have to be better like me?
Because again, it places responsibility.
I had the earthquake in the beginning of time, or he made the earthquake now.
It places responsibility on you, and he doesn't want to accept it.
It may not have anything to do with it.
No, because it has everything to do with you. Because if you're saying that it can change, what changes it? You can 100%. You can say that I'm not even part of this. I'm just another animal here, and that's that. I don't think they believe. That I don't think is. Again, the question is, why would he change? Go back to the question of davening, right? Does davening change Hashem or not? So if you're only in worlds of worlds, the most you can imagine is that the cover is part of the Aron. That's it. And whatever Hashem decided, that persists throughout history. If you understand souls of worlds, so you already understand that, no, depending on how I daven, that's how Hashem decides.
Well, why would someone daven if they don't believe the second?
So they say it changes me. That's their explanation. It's not that it changes. I become worthy of. That's the Rav Kook's answer. Outside of Chassidus, that's the usual answer. But in the Zohar in Chassidus, that I'm only changing myself. The davening changes me, makes me. It's like that Hashem is pouring it, and it's deterministic. He always pours it. And
we still didn't say the divinity factor.
Right, still haven't. So we need one more.
What does that mean? The davening only changes you?
That Hashem is pouring always sustenance, and whether I'm a vessel or not depends on how well I daven. If I'm not a good vessel, so it spills outside of me, I have holes in myself or whatever. I can't carry it, I can't contain what He's giving me. But if I daven well, so that makes me into a better vessel. That's also how they would explain zikuch, that I become a better person. What does it mean to become a better person? It doesn't affect Hashem, it just affects me. That I'm more robust, I'm more holy, whatever. And therefore Hashem can work with me better than He worked with me before. So now we need an example of divinity in this whole thing. So the question is whether we're doing it today or next week.
Is there time for divinity?
It's 12:10.
Just give us a little hint.
So the little hint is very easy. You can work it out yourself.
Oh, that's it? We didn't
I know. We'll do more about it next time. There's a lot of examples in divinity, but the one that's most relatable, because it's almost like an intermediate between souls and divinity, is Hashem's choice of the Jewish people. Okay? So there's one level of choice, which is like the affinity, that really He's connected. Why is He so connected to us? Because we're similar. We're His children, so we look the same way. So the same way that a father is connected to his child or a mother is connected to her child. But the dot that persists, that you have to renew every day, that Hashem has to choose us anew every day. You can't, it's not enough what He did once. It has to be a new choice every time.
Not just every Rosh Hashanah.
Right. No, that's us for Him. Okay? That we have to make Him a king again. But why does He choose us every time anew? For that He needs new dot. You have to give Him new dot all the time, or He has to find new dot for it. Every day, every moment.
Is that not like a marriage?
These are all examples of the same thing, but at different levels.
No,
This is all to understand the difference. So it's every time you meet. Right? How many times do you meet?
hopefully every day. You mean
Ken, so you meet. I mean everything.
I'm wondering, but does that matter the level of like when you get married, even the DOS, like you said, with the $100 or a kid not understanding, till you're married you can't understand it anyway.
Right.
So what's the significance of...
And who said you understand it right away? It takes time to begin to understand it.
Right, so what's the significance of the depth of the dot? Choosing it every day, deeper... Like, does that do something like you could use it with Hashem also?
Tanya put up one a few days ago on Facebook with, what did it say? Something like, she said, the best marriage advice I've ever heard. It's like, the question is, how do you translate all these great lofty thoughts into something in the end that's a meme that people can like grab like that? So it said something like, again, if you only have the meme, so it's not that interesting. It just sounds like, oh, you have to do this. How do I do this? You have to learn it in order to understand the significance. But it said something like, you have to come to a place where you can choose to be together even when you don't like each other. Meaning, it started differently. It said that when you got married... No, that's not the ketera. You choose. No, you choose. It's that. It's no question it's that. So we didn't talk enough about how the ketera affects everything here, but in principle, the ketera is always something you can fall back on, in that sense. But it's very hard to fall back on it because it's not really conscious. Okay, so to say it very simply, it means that for Hashem to choose us every time anew takes into account our biggest problem, which is that we do avirot. Okay? Why does he have to choose us anew every time? So it means, and this is the only way you can get out of an avera, really. What does it mean to renew after an avera? You have to understand that Hashem is choosing you nonetheless. Okay? He chooses you anew every single. That's divinity. It's like to say, why do I call this divinity? It's like on the border because it still deals with something in us. Because really, what is it saying? It's saying that even though I did an avera, there's tshuva. Teshuva is like saying that still Hashem wants me.
Yeah, because He created me.
No, because He could create me, and the moment that He's not interested, I fall out of favor. That's it. It throws me out. I have no more use for you. To say that there's tshuva is to say that something in divinity, as it were, changes. And He's saying that even though, what does tshuva mean? Tshuva is unreasonable. It's not normal. It's return to Him is very nice, but I'm changing the whole relationship even before we started. Like if you accepted me, you created me so that I would follow what you told me. Now I didn't follow. So if you couldn't change yourself, Hashem, like couldn't change your will, so you would throw me out. So what does He need me for? Tshuva says that retroactively I'm changing His will, as it were. Okay? To want me even though I'm now in my new state. Of course, He doesn't want me to stay in that state, but He's willing to accept me with the Avera, with the Chit. What?
There's a clause in the contract that says...
It's a strange clause because it didn't exist before I did Tshuva. It's like I'm rewriting the contract after the fact. He's allowed, so that's why I say it's in divinity, because in a certain sense, He's willing Himself to be rewritten every time.
Basically, when I use free will, I trigger Him to use free will.
So you could say that, but certainly that Hashem also has free will.
Obviously,
but this is like you said, it's like His choice in Himself to rewrite the terms of what He wants from you in the first place.
Tshuva only works because of Hashem's
free will. Okay, that's called im en dat en bina im en bina en dat. Tshuva is bina. But in order to have tshuva, to have bina, you have to have dat first.
Can I assume God activates that free will, that spontaneous recreation, not connected to the beginning of time, without me? I have to be able to assume that because He could do anything.
So again, the pure worlds doesn't depend on you. If it's just a world of worlds, you have no role in it. That's what we said. It's like that you're just another a chess piece on this board.
But in that perspective, can I say God still decided today I want to make an earthquake? This minute, now, I want to go to bed and save her. Nothing to do with me. Or is that like...
Again,
I have to be able to believe that's possible.
So, what is that then? The whole point of worlds is that there's determinism in them. Again, you don't live your life that way. You don't say... It would be a mixing of categories to say that Hashem at this moment is deciding that the ground should be solid without taking me into consideration. Okay? Because again, we can discuss it more next time because it's just another sugya. So this is the beginning of understanding the cover and the aron as being two separate things. Again, the aron is the chokhmah and bina, is the intellect. And the cover is the dat. Now the question is whether they're the same thing. And it has repercussions, and has meaning in a lot of different sugyos. But we still haven't come to the main one. The main one is the kruvim on it. What do they do? Why do we need them? It could be just the cover by itself. It could be the dat. So we already gave one answer. The one answer was that Hashem speaks between the kuvim. But why kuvim? Could have been anything else. The answer we gave is that it's the bond between, that the Kruvim, they give a sense of Kemal Ish Veloyot. It's two figures looking at one another with love, and then the Dat is what appears between them. So that was the first answer we gave about Moshe Rabbeinu. But as we'll see, it's much, much deeper than that. So that these Kruvim, their significance is tremendous, because really, it says in the Gemara, I just started, and then God willing next week, if I remember, we'll finish this topic. But one is, there's different opinions about what they looked like, but the one in the Gemara is the pshat is that one was an old man and one was a baby. One had the face of an older man, and the other one had the face of a little boy, a child. No male and female. In the Gemara, it's just two males. So that needs to be explained, and why that's such a central thing. And of course, this all relates to the what we call the divine chariot, the Merkava, that has 4 faces to it. That each one of the Kruvim there, or each one of the Ofanim, each one of the angels had 4 faces. So we'll have to see what that is in the psyche. And it says that Yechezkel prayed so that the one that had the face of the ox would turn into a face of a Kruv, of a baby. And actually it came first. So this whole thing, this is the essential component of understanding what transformation is, what it means to really change. So we'll get to that next time. It all depends on Dat. That's the whole thing. That you can't have Dat without these 2 Kruvim. So that's like a trailer for next time.
Teaser.
A teaser, right? Okay.